guys, Julia here from JM Squared Vintage. Welcome back to the channel. Today I am here with something a little bit different. Now, I see chatter all the time about people struggling to get sales in their reselling business. So today I want to look through a couple of things that could be going on that could be impeding your ability to get sales, be it on Poshmark or eBay or Depop. There are a few things that are like marketplace specific that we're going to talk about, but for the most part, a lot of these principles apply to all of the different marketplaces that we sell on. But before we get started here, guys, if this is your first time here, if this is your first time stumbling on my channel, first and foremost, welcome. I am Julia, that is my name. We talk all things thrifting and vintage and the business of reselling on the internet here. If that sounds like something that you might be into, consider hitting subscribe down below. I would love to have you along on this journey. But with that being said, guys, we've got a lot to talk about here. I think I've got about 10 things that I want to break down with you. So why don't you go grab yourself a snack, grab yourself a drink. You know I've got my matcha latte. So go grab yourself a notebook, sit back, relax, and let's get into the tips. So the first and probably the easiest thing to fix here is that your descriptions aren't giving enough. And I cannot tell you how many times I will be comping something or shopping for myself and I click into a listing and it's just like one line, it's the name of the item, and that's it. And when you're in this economy where there's a lot of sellers, there's a lot of professional sellers in the mix, you really have to level it up. We're going to take this Doen dress, for example. This is the Quinn dress. This is one of their more popular dresses. Now, the kind of listings that I talk about will have a picture and it'll say the Doen Quinn dress in green. That'll be the extent of the description. That'll be what they have in the title. That'll be what they have in the description box. And if somebody is looking specifically for that dress, they're going to stumble on that dress. But what's happening is you are completely cutting out an entire population of people who are looking for a dress like that, but maybe don't know who Doen is or that this dress is something that they're looking for. So, first of all, you want to put things like the official name. I think this is actually called dark green on the Doen website. You want to make sure that you call like a poplin, midi dress, sheared waist, cap sleeves, off the shoulder, adjustable neckline, cottagecore style, peasant style, boho. All of these keywords are kind of like the soft pull, right? So you've got the people that are laser focused. I want a Doen Quinn dress. Great. Like that's already covered. You also want this to be showing up for the people who are searching for a midi length green cottagecore sheared waist dress, right? Like that maybe don't even know that Doen is a brand that exists out there. You want to make sure that you have multiple ways for these eyeballs to find your listings. And if you just have one line of copy in your descriptions, like you're not doing it. Period. You're not doing it. I get it. It takes a long time. I'm also going to urge you to not use AI descriptions because they tend to keyword stuff. And keywording, I'm not even going to get really into keywording. I did a really deep dive on keywords a few weeks ago. I will link that video down below if keywording and writing your listings is something that you struggle with. I recommend, take 20 minutes and go take a look at that. But at a bare minimum, you need to at least write a description of what it is. And my tip to you, if again you struggle to do this, my tip to you would be pretend you're describing this to somebody who can't see it. Use all of the descriptive words that you possibly can, and that should be a really good foundation. So that's going to be an exponentially larger pool of people than the people that are specifically looking for the Doen Quinn dress. Like I am honestly floored at how frequently I see just like one line descriptions. I'm floored at how much I see that. That is like low-hanging fruit, easy thing to do. And don't feel overwhelmed if you need to like update all of your listings. Just do a few a day. Every 2 months or higher, I relist my listings on all of my different marketplaces. And I always take that as my opportunity to like look at my listings and see if there's any way that I can optimize it or add to it or whatever. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you've got 700 listings with just one line descriptions and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to change this? Just every day when you're relisting those listings, take that opportunity to do it. Bite-sized chunks, guys. Like bite-sized chunks are your friend. Next up, I want to talk about your photos. Another thing that I'm generally floored about is how many times I see pictures that are way dark or like in a messy house. So photo setups can go to the moon in terms of sophistication in which you can do. You can get yourself a nice slant board so that your items like lay out flat. You can get yourself a professional, studio lights. You can get yourself a white box. You can get yourself a professional mannequin. You can hire models. Like you can go to the moon with this, but it's not really necessary. I think if you're just starting out or you're on a budget or you're like me where you're basically using a multi-purpose room to run your business from, I think lighting is the biggest thing. I generally try to photograph when it is bright sunlight. This room in particular gets really good sunlight between like noon and 3 p.m. So it is very evenly lit and it's really good light for photographing. On the rare occasions that I photograph outside of those hours, I'll pull in my filming lights. Now, I have lights that I film with because I do YouTube. So if you don't, my recommendation is that you want to have some kind of direct light. If all you have available to you is like a floor lamp, I would make sure that you have a white light. Yellow lighting, warm lighting tends to do kind of crazy things to colors. If you've ever photographed anything that's navy blue with a warm light, I'm sure you've experienced that joy, especially if you're shooting on your iPhone or whatever. So white light, and you want to make sure that it is pretty direct on the item. You don't want crazy shadows. If you've got you can pick up a ring light pretty inexpensively on Amazon. I'll link one down below. And that might be a good investment if the only time that you have available to photograph your listings is, late night when you're not going to have any kind of natural light going on. The other thing to think about is what you have in the background. Now, I shoot here in my guest bedroom / office / inventory / studio / and I actually have two spots that I photograph on, and for me the thing I always look for is contrast. So if I'm shooting anything that is like white or cream, my walls here are obviously a cream, I will shoot that on the back of a door that's wood, and then pretty much anything else gets shot on the wall, so that provides a little bit of a contrast. And once you have that, if you only have like a really cluttered background, if you only have a really cluttered space that you can photograph in, or if the only place you can photograph in is your basement and it's cinder block walls, like I get it. You can use background removers to, just cut out the entire background around the garment. But once your listing shows up in a search result, which you are doing with the description that we talked about a few minutes ago, now you're in a visual competition, and people are generally, all else being equal, they're going to click on the listings that look the best. So take some time to figure out the optimal way to photograph, just given the situation that you work in. Again, you can go to the moon with your setup. It's not really necessary. I do also recommend, especially if you do a lot of dresses, that you pick up an inexpensive mannequin. I'll link the one that I have down below from Amazon. I think it was like $20. It might even be less than $20. It's lightweight. You throw it in a closet when you're not using it. But for things like wrap dresses or anything like that really just does not show well on a hanger, especially if you don't have a slant board, having that mannequin is super, super helpful. And pick up some clothing clamps to like keep things in place when you're shooting on the mannequin, because they're all like a size small. And obviously not every piece of clothing that we pick up is a size small. Two more things to talk about with photos. Number one, I do recommend taking multiple pictures. There's a lot of listings out there that just have one or two pictures or like a front and a back. This is what I tend to do. I'll do a front. I'll pull out a sleeve to show kind of the silhouette of the actual bodice and the sleeve. That's really helpful if you have kind of a more blouson sleeve, or if you have a bell sleeve or whatever. It also helps show kind of how a waistline is shaped. If you have it hanging and it's kind of doing the V thing where the bottom gets a little bit more narrow. I will do a close-up picture of any details. So like if there's pin tucking or if there's beading, I'll try to get up close so people can see what that looks like. I'll also a lot of times do a close-up of like the pattern or the print, again, so people can see a really true representation of what that looks like. I will take a picture of the brand label. It's always kind of surprising to me when people don't do that. I take a picture of the brand label and the size tag if it's separate, and then generally I'll have a picture of the contents tag, I'll do a picture of the back, etc. The more pictures is a trust builder, right? People want to see what they're getting. Also, just a pro tip, if you are shooting with an iPhone does some post-production on your photos to start with. If you are somebody who struggles to get true colors in pictures, generally, if you're doing a close-up of the label, the closer you get to the item and the less external light is getting into the field of view, the truer the color is going to show. So if you're somebody who struggles to get a true representation of the color of a garment, make sure you're doing a close-up, because that's usually where you can get that like true color read. And the last thing to talk about with photos is stock photos. Now, blanket statement. Using stock photos is against the TOS of every marketplace, and there are companies that will come after you if you use stock photos. And that is 150% within their right to do so. So we're going to get that out there. If you are using stock photos, I highly recommend you use no more than one. No more than two if you have a really interesting back that's not being represented well in any of your pictures. Again, the amount of not brand new with tag items that I see that are only using stock photos, that off the bat is like a lack of trust for me. I'm not even gonna like consider putting in a bid or buying that item. Like, it's use a maximum of one or two, and then everything else should be a photo of the item that you are selling. Now, obviously, boutiques are a different beast, and that's a whole different conversation. And if you have like the license to use the stock photos, that's a different conversation. But if you are reselling secondhand clothing, just be really judicious if you do use them, but make sure that most of your photos are of the actual item that people are getting. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is your pricing strategy. You are either priced too high or too low. So I know that there are some people out there that will price things deliberately high. And when I say deliberately high, I mean like taking an Old Navy tank top and charging $45 for it, kind of baiting for somebody to make an offer and for the offer to be a little bit higher than it would be if they had priced it in a more normal range. And while there is probably some validity to that, but I think at the end of the day, it's just going to take a lot longer. And when you think about time in inventory, time is money, right? So when you have something sitting in your inventory for a really long time, just to get that $3 or $4 extra, or whatever it is, that's going to cancel out in the cost of storage or in the cost of not being able to have fresh inventory in there or whatever, right? Like, that is, it might work eventually. Everything will find a buyer eventually, but I think that that kind of strategy will add an aging inventory problem that you probably would rather not have. For me personally, I would rather have a super fast, lower dollar sale than something that takes a year and a half that's going to net me $5 more. Like, that's not a bet that I want to make anyway. But the fact of the matter is, when you're pricing too high, I'm telling you right now that people will sort by price. So right off the bat, if somebody's sorting by price from low to high, you're going to get dropped all the way down to the bottom. They're not even going to look at you. If you are pricing your stuff twice as high as anybody else is, you're off the table for 90% of buyers. I kind of understand the psychology there, but you are harming your chances far more than you think you are. On the flip side, there is also the problem of pricing too low. Now, I'm going to get into my pricing strategy, and I'm telling you right now that if you are, especially if you are new to this and you are kind of confused as to how to set your pricing, and you're looking at sold comps in Poshmark and they're everywhere from $3 to, $50. The thing that gets a little bit tricky is because Poshmark has not separated live sale sold prices versus closet sold prices, it's creating a little bit of murkiness in this world. Personally, I have a pretty big beef with that because that is two fundamentally different kinds of sales, right? Like an auction sale versus a negotiated or retail sale is a very different thing, just like from the foundation of what they are and how buyers and sellers behave in those kinds of transactions. But if you are pricing too low, like, and I know a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to be the highest priced person here. Cool. Don't be that person. I'm telling you right now, I think it's a pretty safe decision to not be the highest priced person in the world. And I know that the next kind of piece of logic that will come into your head is, I want to be lower than everybody else out there. Now, that's fine if you want to price it $1 lower than the lowest seller. Just know that that's going to result in a race to the bottom if you kind of operate with that mentality, because the next person that wants to do the same thing is going to drop it lower and lower and lower. And that's going to affect pricing for every seller out there. But if you are pricing too low, like, I get it, some people just want to move stuff. I would urge you, if that is what you want, I would still price your items where they are and then run a sale to get it to the low price that you want to move it at. Because running a sale does two things. Number one, you still maintain your perceived value, and more on that in a second. But number two, it makes the people feel like they're getting a screaming deal. That's a really strong motivator in buying behavior. But the bottom line is, if you are pricing your items super, super low, there is going to be a perceived value issue. this is something that's talked about a lot in pricing discussions and consumer goods, and I've been in those rooms. I have been party to many of these conversations. If you don't know me, if you don't, I was in marketing for 20 years and I've participated in hundreds of pricing conversations. So this is a big thing. If you price something too low, the buyer's perception of what it is that you are selling, I don't care if it's that Doen dress that we know is stunning, that we know is high quality. If you price that dress at $5, that buyer's going to think that there's something wrong with it and they're not going to buy it. They're going to go for the items that are priced kind of middle of the pack, and then it's going to be a matter of like seeing if there's any damage, and then it's probably going to be the people with the nicest pictures that they're going to buy from, with all else being equal. So you want to make sure that you keep your pricing kind of out of the gutter. You also don't want it in the stratosphere. You really want to be in between kind of the lowest and the highest. Now, if you are new to this game and you are utterly mystified at how to price, here's kind of how I would do it. It's going to take a little bit of practice. You will develop your nuance for this fairly quickly, I think. But if you are to look at sold comps, and I would recommend that you are looking at sold comps both on Poshmark and on eBay, because you're gonna have some skewing factors, especially in Poshmark. Okay, so say you're looking at this Doen dress. I would pretty much throw out anything that's like $20 or under. Like, don't even take that into consideration. That is almost certainly a live show sale that had nobody there and somebody got a screaming deal. Like, don't even look at those. Don't even like take those into consideration. I would look at kind of your median. Say that dress has sold comps, like the actual sold executed prices between $50 and $100. And that's kind of your goal to get there. I would aim to get, obviously, take into consideration condition and all that kind of stuff. I would aim to get 75. That would be my kind of goal price on that. And I would take that price and I would add 30% to allow for negotiation. That's kind of my formula. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance. There are snap decisions that happen for every single item. And there's obviously condition, there's scarcity, those things come into play. But in general, if my sold comps are between $50 and $100, I'm going to hope to get 75. I'm going to take that 75 and then I'm going to add 30% on it. And that's what I'm going to list it at. Hopefully that's helpful. You know, again, if you are just starting out here and you are new, I know that that is something that can be very, very intimidating. And if you're selling something that doesn't have a lot of sold comps, find the most comparable stuff. Again, don't price it too high. People are going to think you're unreasonable. They're not even going to want to negotiate with you. Don't price it too low. People are going to think that there's something wrong with your item. Price it right in the middle and keep that kind of pricing structure afloat. Next thing I want to talk about is your items themselves. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes you're selling stuff that's just not in demand. And that is going to take a little bit of time and research and doing the work and kind of watching things to see how they play out. I see a ton of people when they just start out, you know, they go to the bins and they buy everything, or they go and they buy pallets of whatever, and they're buying things just because it's cheap. Now, yes, there is a buyer for everything. That is real talk. However, you want to start, you know, especially if you're starting out, you want to start to whittle down what you source and what you keep in your inventory to stuff that is going to be relatively fast selling and selling for a relatively good price. Can you go and buy a pallet of Shein returns for 25 cents a piece? Yes, that's pure profit right there. 100%, that is pure profit. But that stuff is going to take a long time to sell because people can buy that Shein stuff off of Shein for $4 instead of paying $3 on Poshmark plus $7 shipping, right? So like, you want to start with making sure you get out of that mindset of I'm buying this just because it's cheap. Like, that goes for reselling and for your own personal closet. Anyway, if you wouldn't buy it full price, don't buy it. But with that, you want to keep your eye on saturation. That's something that I try to talk about a lot in my videos. Like, if I, you know, Travis Mathew, perfect example. Travis Mathew is something that used to be in and out of my closet so quick. And I've noted recently that it started to slow down a little bit. So Travis Mathew golf polos, which were always a really quick $15, $20 for me, are starting to be a little bit of a slower $15, $20 for me, right? So you got to keep your eyes out for these saturation points. Free People really went through that as well. There's a lot of Free People out there, and it's a matter of figuring out which pieces of Free People, especially if you're sourcing in like a regular thrift store, if you're sourcing in yard sales where things are going to be a little bit more expensive. You really want to make sure that you're picking up Free People pieces that people want. Otherwise, you're going to be getting $15, $20 for them. Fine when you're getting that for $1 at the bins, not fine when you're paying $9.99 for a dress, right? So you have to keep your eye out for oversaturation. So with that, one of my best tools is to use eBay when you're comping and see how many of those items are for sale and then see how many sold, right? If you look at a Free People white t-shirt, I'm not talking We the Free, that's a different beast, like Free People white t-shirt, and you see that there's 19,000 for sale and 350 that have sold, that's oversaturated. So use the eBay comp search to figure out saturation points. The other thing is maybe you have something that's truly out of style. Now, one of the things that I talk about a lot when I'm sourcing and stuff that I look for are things that kind of exist outside of trend. I like to find things that are lifestyle based. Think about Log and Look. Log and Look is not a trend, that is just a way of life. Think about people who dress retro. That is not a trend, that is a way of life. Now, obviously, we can't just walk into a thrift store and say, hey, I want to buy 12 Log and Look pieces. That's not how it works, but that is something that I do focus on, and that is the stuff that I like to pick up the most. Otherwise, you need to operate really in trends. Now, you can build a niche in anything. You can build a niche in more mature plus size pieces that it sells fabulously. But if you are looking for like youth focused trends, like you really have to be like finger on the pulse to make sure that you are staying within the trend cycles. I try to do a trends video with every runway season, so we see what's kind of coming into stores in the following season. So keep your eyes out for that. That's always really fun for me to do, and it's a great excuse for me to like live on Instagram and watch all the runway shows on YouTube. But other than that, I would do your best to keep your finger on the pulse. If you are overwhelmed by that thought, follow a few people on Instagram or on Facebook or on TikTok that'll, kind of keep you abreast of trends, and that should keep you more or less in the clear. If you feel fish out of water in the trend space, period, I would consider building out a niche of something that doesn't fluctuate as much, that doesn't change as much. Again, plus size, more mature clothing, fabulous. Like that is something that can be found at any thrift store anywhere in the country. It's something where the styles don't change all that much and it sells really, really well. That's a great place to go if you feel completely overwhelmed by really trying to follow trends. And another quick little trick is there's a lot of brands that'll actually put a date on their clothing. So for example, Madewell, if you look at the interior like contents tag, there's usually a little tag behind it that'll have basically a date code. So it'll say like HO16. That means that it was released in the holiday season of 2016. So you can always look for stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of things to consider here. But the fact of the matter is you do need to make sure that the stuff that you are pulling in is stuff that people are looking to buy. And again, there is a buyer for everything, but you don't want to be the person buying the one shirt for the one person in the world who wants that shirt. You want to be the person buying the one shirt that has 400,000 people that want that same shirt, right? Like that's a numbers game. So do your best to make sure that the stuff that you are pulling in has a pretty robust buyer pool. All right, let's talk about influencers. Time for me to do a little bit of navel gazing. It's weird to call myself an influencer in any way, shape, or form. This is bizarre, but you're listening to influencers too much. Now, influencers can be a great source of information. I hope that I am a great source of information for you. The one thing to remember, whoever it is that you're listening to, there are no two businesses in this world that are exactly the same. Every single business in this world is different and unique. I constantly say, if this is something you're looking for, run it through the lens of your own business. That is the most important thing when you are watching different influencers. Again, you can get tons of amazing information, but you always need to run everything that all of us say through the lens of your own business. Everybody has access to different kind of inventory, right? Like I live in Los Angeles. I find wild stuff here. You might live in Des Moines and have a very different market of things that you can get. Not that there's not profit in Des Moines. There's absolutely profit in every thrift store, but you need to run everything that I say through the lens of what you can and can't do and what you can and can't get in Des Moines, if that makes sense. So, different items are going to be available. Pricing is going to be different. Time constraints are going to be different. So, number one, you don't ever want to be comparing yourself to anybody in this marketplace because, like, the only person you are in competition with is yourself, right? Like, truly, again, words for life. Comparison is the thief of joy. That is real talk, but just make sure that everything you are taking in from every source, be it me, be it other YouTubers, be it people on Instagram, people on TikTok, whatever, just make sure that everything that you are taking in is going through the lens of your business, because nobody has view of that business like you do. And take what resonates, take what makes sense, leave what doesn't. But whatever you do, don't try to carbon copy what somebody else does, because your environment looks different than theirs, right? So you can't carbon copy it because you're not the same. You're not in the same place, etc. All right, let's talk about sharing and promotion and engagement in these marketplaces. So particularly when we're talking about Poshmark, engagement in the community absolutely positively matters in terms of how many eyeballs are going to get on your listings. And again, I urge you to go and take a look at the video I did a few weeks ago. We talk a lot about the algorithm and all the different ways that these kind of actions play into that algorithm. But make no mistake about it, if you are not sharing your items on Poshmark, they are getting buried. So set it and forget it doesn't exist in this world. I regret to inform you. That being said, there are services, I use Vendoo, there's Posh Sidekick, that will automatically share all of your items for you, like without you even having to think about it. I guarantee you, if you haven't been sharing your closet on Poshmark and you get one of these services to do that work for you, I guarantee you that will pay for itself within the first week. So you've really got to play the game in terms of sharing and engagement, especially over on Poshmark. Depop, the same deal. You can refresh your listings. It'll get them higher up in search results. The other thing to think about is promotions. Now, Poshmark Promoted Closet has a lot of mixed results. I didn't have a great result with it, but it's also because I'm doing everything else available to me to make sure that my listings are placed up higher. So, they always save whatever the first 3 or 4 spots for Promoted Closet. But in general, my results will probably still be close to the top because I'm sharing, because I've keyworded well, because I've got enough in my description, because, like all of the other things that I do help me keep my listings pretty high in search results. So adding the Promoted Closet isn't doing too terribly much for me. Now, if you're super busy and you don't have a ton of time to really thoughtfully keyword your stuff, or you don't want to use Vendoo, or you don't want to use Posh Sidekick or one of the platforms, Promoted Closet might be the ticket. That might be what you need to get your stuff moving. Just know that it is there, know it is available to you, and if you don't want to deal with anything else that I'm talking about here, that might be a good move for you. Now on eBay, I feel differently about it. I do promote on eBay. They have an option that is pay per sale, and you can set the percentage of your sale to whatever it is. They'll make recommendations. Feel free to edit that as you need. I do find that valuable, and I like the way that it's set up in that I'm not paying unless one of my items actually sells. If you're listing on eBay and you've got your listings dialed and you've got your photos dialed and you're still not seeing many sales, I would consider promoting. I think it's a worthy investment. And again, you can set it up to only charge you if you make that sale. And the other thing to do is to make sure that once your listings go stale is that you are refreshing them and relisting them on Poshmark. They've kind of gone hard recently at the people that are refreshing too soon. So just make sure that you're doing it after they've been listed for 60 days and just go slow. Don't go and do 100 in a day. Do 10 a day, do 5 a day, whatever is, kind of sustainable for you. But make sure that you are relisting and refreshing those listings, and always take that time as an opportunity to look at your listings and see if there's any way that they can be improved. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is that you are not cross-listing. Guys, we've talked about this before, but if you are new here, welcome. You need to be cross-listing. If you want to make reselling a steady stream of income, be it a full-time income or a side hustle income, but if you want that stream to be consistent, you have to be cross-listing. Now, if you're thinking about cross-listing manually, that thought should strike fear in your heart. That would be an absolute nightmare. I tried it for 2 weeks. It was not pretty. It was not pretty. I discovered Vendoo very early on. I've been using them forever. This is not sponsored by them. I have worked with them in the past, but this is not sponsored by them. I just really love their platform. Complete game changer in what I do. Not only does it save me a ton of time in the actual listing part of cross-listing, but it manages my inventory across the different marketplaces. I don't know if other cross-listing services have this, but they have a sale detection feature. So if something sells on eBay, it'll automatically detect that sale and automatically delist it on any other marketplaces that I have it listed on. That's huge. That is huge because obviously my work keeps me on my laptop a lot, but I'm also outsourcing. I'm also filming. I'm also doing a bunch of different things. I don't ever want to have to risk, something selling on 2 different platforms. But the main reason you want to be cross-listing is this. While there is some crossover in their audiences, there's not much. Poshmark has its buyer pool. eBay has its buyer pool. Depop has its buyer pool. Mercari has its buyer pool. You are automatically multiplying the amount of potential buyers by 3, 4, wherever you want to list on. You are automatically multiplying your potential buyer pool by that many when you are cross-listing. Easiest one to think about is like Depop. I think Depop is growing and I think Depop's buyer pool is expanding, but for the most part, right now, their customers are quite young, right? So it's a lot of people in college, it's a lot of people in high school, and they're not necessarily over on Poshmark. They're not over on Mercari. Now, if you're not cross-listing, you're not getting in front of those people. Same deal with eBay. People think that Poshmark is the big kahuna in the reselling world, but make no mistake about it, eBay's buyer pool is like infinitely bigger than Poshmark. So it's the most intimidating service to sell on, but I promise if you use a cross-lister, it makes it pretty dang easy. I want to say that if once I write my listing, it's like an additional 20 seconds to list on any other platform that I want to. It is money well spent every month. And between the time it saves me, because I'm going to cross-list no matter what, the time it saves me to do the actual cross-listing and the sales that I make in the other marketplaces, my cross-lister pays for itself multiple times over every month. It is pretty much, when it comes to software, my number one investment and the number one place that I would recommend anybody invest if you are looking to be a reseller and have a steady stream of income. You got to cross-list. And the other big thing to think about is that if you're only selling on Poshmark and you're putting all your eggs in one basket, you're subject to 2 things. Number one, you're subject to corporate whims. Look at what happened last year when Poshmark decided to change the fees and sales dropped off a cliff. You are subject to that. Maybe they decide tomorrow that they're going to close up the business. Like, it's probably not going to happen, but you are subject to the corporate whims. Number 2, you're also subject to technology failures. So, say Poshmark gets hacked. What happens then? Say your closet on Poshmark gets hacked. What happens then? At least you're insulated because your items are listed on other platforms, right? So if this is something that you want to do, you've got to cross-list. Like, come here. Cross-list. Time to cross-list. All right, the next thing I want to talk about, and this is going to be kind of a hot take. I've had people, I know some of my viewers have talked about this, and that is that you're not giving enough information and you're not responding to questions. Now, my policy in general, and this is something that has evolved over time, is that if I'm listing something that is like of a rigid fabric or it's a fitted silhouette or it's vintage or the sizing seems a little off to me, I'm going to list measurements. I'm going to at least list pit to pit. Now, I absolutely have some listings that are still around from before I started to do that. But when people ask you for measurements, like if you're not going to put measurements in, which I do recommend that you consider doing, at least on those items that are, again, rigid, close fit, vintage, look smaller than they are, look bigger than they are. If you're not going to do that and somebody comes and asks you for measurements, please do that. Now, I am probably extra sensitive to this because I am somebody with a fuller bust who has to ask that question, because there's been many times I've bought things from pre-owned and new that just don't fit my bust. So I'm extra sensitive to this. I see chatter on online groups and stuff about, oh, well, they asked me for measurements and I never heard from them again. Well, okay, they're asking for measurements because they're not sure if something's going to fit. And chances are, if you give them the measurements, it's like 50-50. Maybe it will fit, maybe it won't. And they don't have to say, oh, well, it doesn't fit. I get lots of people that do say that, but also they might just not buy it. And that's okay. But I'll tell you right now that me, as somebody who has that problem, if I'm looking to buy something from you and I'm not sure if that's going to close over my bust and I ask you for measurements and you never respond to me, I'm not going to buy it. So guys, respond to your buyers. I know it can be annoying. I know it's frustrating when you give them the measurements and they don't buy, but understand that when they are asking for measurements, they're asking for measurements for a reason and they might not fit. And that's okay. But guess what? They might fit. I can't tell you how many times I've given people measurements and they're super thankful and then they buy immediately. Oh, I wasn't sure if it was going to fit. Thank you so much for getting that for me. And to be totally honest, the last thing I want is for somebody to buy it not knowing if it's going to fit and then have it not fit when they get there. I would much rather take the 30 seconds to grab something out of my inventory to get a measurement for them than for them to buy it, get it there, open up a case, and try to return it because it doesn't fit. That doesn't look good for you as a seller. It's a pain logistically. It's a bad experience for the buyer. Just get the measurements, guys. I get it. I get it's a pain, but we are dealing with the public, and sometimes you got to answer questions, especially when you're selling something that is secondhand and might not fit. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is that you're not sending offers. This has almost become table stakes in a lot of reselling marketplaces. So if somebody likes one of your items, it is almost expected that you are going to send an offer to the people that like your items. You can do this manually. You can do it once a day, manually go in and send out offers. You can also Vendoo has an offer tool. I know Posh Sidekick has an offer tool. There's lots of different platforms out there that will automatically send offers for you. I'm pretty sure you can automatically set up offers in eBay as well. But I will tell you that at least 50% of my sales on all of my platforms come as a result of me sending out an initial offer. Remember that 30% in the pricing conversation? Like, this plays in here, right? Like, I set that 30% wiggle room so I have room to send offers and get a counter offer back, whatever the case may be. But if you are not sending offers and you're just letting those likes kind of go into the ether, that's leaving money on the table. Because guess what? They're going to probably like 3 things that are identical, and guess who's going to get the sale? It's going to be the person who sends them the offer and engages with the potential buyers. So send those offers. Again, if you don't want to be doing it manually, look for a platform that will do it for you. Again, Vendoo has that. I know Posh Sidekick does it, but it's worth it. I'm telling you, at least 50%, if not more, like 75%, come as a result of offers that I initiate. So I don't even want to know what my sales would look like if I didn't have that running at all times. Send some offers. Finally, the last thing that could be hurting your sales is that you're not consistent as a seller. And that could mean that you're not consistent in terms of how frequently you're listing. You're not consistent in sharing your items. You're not consistent in refreshing your items. Poshmark started as a platform where you could sell things out of your closet. You list something that you don't wear anymore, and eventually somebody will want it and it'll sell. It has ballooned into something much, much bigger than that. There are a lot of professional sellers like myself, like probably many of you watching. And with that comes a more intense algorithm that we have to play with. And I can tell you right now, every search algorithm in the world really likes consistency. So again, go and watch that video where I go into the weeds here. But in terms of listing, my quick tip is that you figure out how many things you can list a day. If that is 1 listing, great. If that's 5 listings, great. If you only have time to sit down and write listings 1 day a week, my recommendation is that you write them for the whole week and list them, like actually hit publish every day. So say you only have time to sit down and write 7 listings. Great. That's 1 a day. And then when you want to list it on the marketplaces, it just takes 20 seconds to go in and click list, and that's that. You're better off publishing 1 a day than you are publishing 7 in 1 day and not listing for the next 6 days until you get to the next day that you can actually sit down and write listings. So consistency matters, and that's going to matter with where you are placed in the search algorithm. So make sure that whatever it is that you decide that you can do consistently, that it is sustainable. That's a big thing. Be very honest with yourself. If you're working a full-time job and you're a mom of 3, whatever, and you only got 1.5 minutes a day, with the exception of 1 day, okay, great. Now you know what you got to do. Write 7 listings on Sunday after the kids go to bed, and then every day that week, publish 1. That's consistency. That'll play very, very nicely in the algorithm. Consistency is key in pretty much everything we do in life, right? So why would this be any different? But guys, that is it. That is 10 different reasons that your listings might not be selling. Hopefully some of this was helpful. Don't feel overwhelmed. If a lot of these things resonated with you, if a lot of these things feel like things that you can improve upon, don't feel like you need to do it all at once. Bite-sized chunks, do a few listings a day, whatever works for you. But I promise, if you are lacking in some of these areas and you can make these small tweaks to get them up to speed, guaranteed your sales will start to move again. But guys, if you had fun, please consider leaving a like or comment on this video. Of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. I would love to have you along on this journey. If you have any other kind of content like this that you would like to see me make, don't ever hesitate to put that down in the comments down below. I keep a little list in my handy dandy little book here. In fact, this video idea came from one of you guys. But guys, without further ado, I hope you have the most beautiful week, lots of great sales, happy hunting, and I will see you all in the next one.